Hi, I'm Audree Grubesic, and welcome to the Offsite Dirt Network. This show was created to spotlight the people and ideas actively transforming how we build. Through offsite, modular, and industrialized construction, we focus on real conversations with industry leaders who are moving beyond the theory and into execution, developing systems, scaling production, and delivering housing in the real world. Today, we welcome Paul Richards, Managing Director at GUR Build, a leader at the forefront of industrialized modern methods of construction in the UK and beyond. Paul has spent the last 9 years driving the industrialization of MMC, modern methods of construction, through housing systems, with a sharp focus on scalable, repeatable, and productive ready solutions. As a developer behind Thunderhaus, an on-site production system, Paul bridges the gap between factory thinking and on-site execution, rethinking how homes are manufactured, deployed, and delivered at speed. In this conversation, we will explore what truly takes to move MMC from concept to commercial reality, from new product innovation and its systemized delivery model to the hard lessons learned when scaling housing production in the real world conditions. That was a lot to say. Welcome, Paul. How are you?
Hi, Audrey. Thanks for having me on.
I'm so glad you're here. I would love for you to kind of jump in about why most MMC systems are scaling and struggling to scale on on-site production and how it's changing the equation.
Oh, that's a big question. So, a lot of MMC, as I see it, especially in the UK, for example, MMC is a new term, really, and we're not really used to manufacturing housings off-site. So, when the idea of starting to manufacture housing off-site came in, me as a previous factory owner, I've had decades of owning factories and trying to deliver stuff into the housing industry. I know it's a bit of a task. And you just can't come in with a new system and expect it to immediately take off. It takes time for everybody to digest exactly what you're trying to do. And then for me, I was looking at some of the bigger guys and what they were trying to do, and was it really what we called a house, or how we would describe a house in the UK and what we'd expect from a house? And that was really the start of it. We were trying to, in my opinion, and the opinion of the masses, really, what were they trying to do? And that was really where it started to come unstuck for me. Now, I've been a factory owner since I was a kid, and I know the expenses behind a factory. And you don't start something the size of a housing operation and expect, like I just said, expect it to start paying back immediately. It takes time. And I think a lot of the offsite guys expected a quick return. A lot of the investors expected a quick return. And I think when you're looking at something so fragmented as the housing industry, you've got to give it a little bit longer than a 5 year plan. 25 years, and you've got a chance. A 5 year plan, I don't think you're really going to get going. And I think that's really been the case. A lot of investors put their money in, they expected quick returns, and it didn't happen. And and the market sort of kicked back really. So that was it.
I love that you are the managing director at GUR Build. Can you give our audience a little bit more understanding about your operation, being that you've been in the industry so long and just a great advocate that I've been following on LinkedIn?
Well, so back to what we said. So I've got a manufacturing mindset and a production mindset and a product mindset. So when somebody says to me, I was in the housing industry, years ago when it was a brick and block mindset. You could only build houses really in the UK and mortgage them. And that's really the issue here is the mortgageability about what changes you're trying to bring into a traditional industry. So if you're going to bring in change, the steps of change you need to understand, and the stakeholders you need to engage with. And so for me, it was okay, we can manufacture something great. Now, how do we educate the industry? And, how can we bring in everybody else on board? And I think that's been missing. And it's something I get quite frustrated about because, again, the same way, I see it the same in America, I see it in Canada and a lot of Europe, where somebody come up with a really good idea and, to them it makes sense and it makes perfect sense, but then does it fit with the other stakeholders that you need to bring in on the journey with you? And usually it doesn't. And what I saw here in the UK was the big money coming in, and it was some really serious backing coming into the offsite industry, but they weren't bringing the stakeholders with them. They thought that they could come in with a product and rewrite the book, and that wasn't going to happen in the UK, and it didn't happen. And back to products as well. For me, you can't come into an industry and change an industry with the same old stuff. You just can't. You can't reinvent. Or put a brand to something that doesn't work in the modern world, and that's really been one of the reasons I don't think a lot of MMC that's out there at the moment will go into the future markets that are emerging. And that's something that I'd like to talk about, the emerging markets, and then the role of MMC coming into those markets, and the importance of MMC and people that understand offsite construction in the emerging markets that are coming.
There's so much resistance, right? In the last decade of really advocating for this industry, and I've met so many people that are doing great in this industry that have figured it out. And building and construction is one thing, and manufacturing and having a factory and a plant and a system and creating scalability is a whole different
Yeah,
operation, right?
yeah,
And so we're
absolutely.
taking a lot of traditional builders and developers and we're putting them into a mindset that maybe they're not completely familiar with. And that's why, Paul, I love seeing what you are doing and following you because truly I feel like you come from this manufacturing, this scalable system, this operational understanding of housing. And I think that repeatable system, that equation is what needs to be understood in our industry. Would you agree?
You said key words. Everything we do has got to be understood, and it's not. And I think what's happened in the past, because you know, I was as a young lad, I was a builder as a young lad, and I didn't know what technology was out there, what technologies in what other industries you can connect with other industries, or rather, what other industries have already perfected that can come down into the construction industry. And once you start understanding it, what we're trying to do has already been done. Is it right for the housing industry? No, not quite. And it's just what tweaks do we need to do to bring those proven processes to the housing industry, and that's really where I spent all my energy really is trying to find out what works and then bring that to the housing industry. So I've been very fortunate over the last decade to be involved in some of the government programs and what they did. And I don't know if you want me to talk about it, but I'll just briefly talk about it. Our government brought in, and it's something that your government should do. They brought in, they ran a program of change. It's called Construction Innovation Hub. So they ran a program of change. I think it was a 70-odd million pound UK government backed program of change, and it was based around schools and hospitals really. And I got asked to come along, and I said, look, I'm a housing guy. I'm not a schools and hospitals guy. I don't know if you've ever worked on those sort of projects. I have. It's not for me really. They're too drawn out. I got quite a short attention span. I'd like to build a house, get it done, get it
Stay
finished.
in one lane, stay in one
Yeah,
lane, right?
yeah,
Okay,
yeah. So,
got
but
it.
it was the advances that they were doing to bring in schools and hospitals. Could that come down to housing? The new techniques, the new materials, the finishes. Could that come down to housing? And that's what I was looking for. I learned an awful lot with the guys. I was lucky enough to see. I was a spokesperson for the design team, and I was lucky enough to work with some of probably the biggest architects brands on the planet. And it was how they go about their operation or their day to day. And it was, I think, it's well overdue. That comes down into the house building sector. But what you talked about, the understandability, making everything simple. I think that's key to this because a lot of builders really are, especially this time of year, they're not really open to change because they're worried about the pay at the end of the month. They're worried about the weather kicking in, and so they're not really that receptive to anybody like myself saying, "Look, we've got a new way of doing stuff this time of year," when they should be. So there's a lot of pushback to change come in, but change has to. The drivers now are saying everything's got to change. You've got your problems with your costs. You've got your problems with your trades. You've got whatever you talk about when in the construction, especially the house building industry, you've got problems. So can we address those problems? And that's really where I started to focus on the Thunderhaus because for me it was the processes of offsite work. Everybody agrees. making stuff in a factory works. The idea of the repeatability in the factory, the controlled environment, operating it within a controlled environment makes perfect sense. But is that factory, what do you want from a factory? And is that factory ever in the right position, in the right place where you want it? And no, it's not. And, especially when you talk about the States, and I talk to a lot of guys over in the States and Canada, usually where their offsite factories set up isn't usually where the end modules are going to finally sit. And that's a huge operation to get that from factory to site. So what I did in the UK, what I wanted to do in the UK, is it rains. You can look outside 1 minute, it's great, and the next minute you get a cloud comes from nowhere and it tips down. So it was, can we cover the build? That was really it. Now, can I protect the build during the build? Can I protect the guys? Can I keep the guys dry? Can I have them having a cup of coffee, in the dry instead of out in the rain watching their cups fill back up again? So it's I've been on site as a kid. Usually everything stops when it rains or when it freezes, and that happens quite a lot in the UK. So that's a lot of downtime. So can we use the benefits of offsite technology and transfer that to site? So I call it factory pairing, offsite and onsite pairing. So you take your gains off your factory and you bring it onto site, and then it's what do you need to do on site to create the correct environment for those gains to maximize those efficiencies, really. And then it's once you start that, okay, you're starting to open a completely new way of thinking, and it's what technologies can you bring in.